Elizabeth Chappell, a lifelong entrepreneur who finally found my niche. After years of new ideas and jumping from business to business, I figured out how to turn a craft into a successful career. In 2016, I started a monthly subscription box for quilters. That little startup has grown into a thriving, multiple six-figure business that I am so proud of. As a published author, designer of fabrics and patterns being sold throughout the world, my favorite thing to do is to teach others how to grow a career of their dreams. Each week, you'll hear from me or from other guests who are creative entrepreneurs, so you can learn exactly what to do and what not to do to grow a career that's more rewarding and successful than you ever thought possible. If you're ready to turn your craft into a career that you love, I am so excited you're here. Welcome to the Craft to Career podcast. Hello, quilterpreneurs and Craft to Career podcast listeners. Today we have Abby Glassenberg. She is the co-founder of the Craft Industry Alliance. I'm very excited to chat with her today for you to hear this conversation. It's really fascinating to hear how and why the Craft Industry Alliance was formed and just what all it entails. If you've ever, maybe you've not heard of it. If you have, you might have been like, should I join this? What are the benefits? What does this even look like? And if you've not heard of it, you're going to really love learning about the Craft Industry Alliance. So let's dive in and let me introduce you to Abby Glassenberg. Abby, I am so excited to have you here on the Craft to Career podcast. Thank you for being here. For our listeners, can you just introduce who you are in the craft community?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. I am Abby Glassenberg, and I'm the co-founder and president of Craft Industry Alliance, which is the trade association for the crafts industry. And I'm also a sewing pattern designer. I have a line of patterns and some books and licensing and all of that good stuff for stuffed animals and dolls, and started that with a blog called While She Naps back in 2005.
Okay, so that was kind of like the blog heyday, wasn't it? Where it was really big and all of that. I'm very curious, what made you interested to start this Craft Industry Alliance?
So I was a sixth grade social studies teacher, and then I had a baby and became a stay-at-home mom, and needed something else to do besides just take care of my daughter. And so I read about blogs in the New York Times and thought there must be craft blogs out there. And at that time, this was like fall of 2004, there were a few, like a handful. So I started reading them and participating, thought I could start my own. So I did in the spring. And through that experience, got on Etsy when Etsy was in beta in July of 2005, because I enjoyed making stuffed animals and wanted to sell them. But at that time, like coding a website was really complex. So Etsy was like a godsend. And so it kind of became a business right from the very beginning, even though it was really teeny tiny. And I hadn't really intended to start a business. It just sort of happened. And then over the course of 10 years, from 2005 to 2015, I just had a lot of different experiences that allowed me to see that there was a whole business side of craft that consumers were not necessarily aware of. I mean, I've always been crafty, always loved to make things, and just didn't know that, there were trade shows and book deals and contracts and all of this stuff. Like I said, I didn't go to business school. I don't have a law degree. I was a teacher, so I didn't know anything about those things. And as my own sewing pattern business started to develop, I started to have to deal with those things myself and needed to, understand a book contract, for example, and then realized, oh, wait, a lot of my friends, because lots of bloggers were getting book contracts back in, 2009, their contract deal was different from mine. So some people were getting in advance and some people weren't. Some people had ebook rights and some people didn't. And so I felt like, number one, we didn't know what was possible because everybody sort of kept it quiet and private. And number two, like I didn't really know how to read the contract, and had some experiences where I got screwed over because I signed something that I shouldn't have signed, without really understanding what it was. And so I started to explore, in addition to like DIY tutorials, which is really what my blog was about and about raising three children. I started to explore like, okay, well, what is a book contract and how do you get one? And what does it say? And what are the options out there? And how do you negotiate? And interviewing people about those things because I was just interested in it. And I started a newsletter that was sending out some of that information. And then in 2013, as I said, I've been an Etsy seller now for 20 years. So in 2013, Etsy kind of made this big change where they allowed sellers to have production partners. And it was like this big change. And they had a big meeting, like a virtual meeting about it, town hall, which I watched. And then I just wrote about it on my blog because I would write about Etsy too, since I had been, that was part of my business. And Etsy, so a representative from Etsy reached out and was like, oh, we read your article and we'd love to talk to you further about your viewpoints. And I was like, I don't really need to talk to them. But if I could record the conversation and share it with the readers, that would be actually super interesting. And I'm sure they'd say no. So I don't really want to talk to them anyway. So I'll just ask. So I did. And they said yes. So I didn't really understand how to record a conversation, but figured that out real quick. And recorded it and posted the audio as part of like a blog post. And it was downloaded 8,000 times in 12 hours and and it was just like this crazy experience. And I was like, I need a podcast. So I started a podcast. It really started in January of 2014. And in that, doing the podcast, I interviewed a woman who had a very popular sewing blog back in those days, for those who have been around for a while, called Sew Mama Sew. Her name's Kristen Link, and she had a contributor blog, and it was a big blog. And so she had been a guest on my podcast, and we kind of became friendly. And I was, as I said, sending out this newsletter with all this business information, and was in a phase where I was thinking, well, maybe I could monetize this newsletter. This was before Substack and before they made it easy to charge people for a newsletter. But I was like, well, so I started to explore how to do that. At the same time, she called me and was like, we should start a craft business conference. And I had 3 kids who were little. One of whom has special needs. And I was like, I can't even leave my house, much less start a craft business conference or even go to one. But I was like, I am doing this with this newsletter thing. And so we just started talking, and the two of us kind of came up with this third idea, which would be a trade association. And there were trade associations, still are, for the industry. People remember TNNA for the yarn industry, the Craft and Hobby Association, which was more for like mixed media, scrapbooking and paper. And, so there were these trade associations in existence, NAMTA for art materials. But really at that time, they were essentially a trade show. So the show was what the association was. And when you joined the association, you bought a ticket to the show. That's really what you got. And we thought, well, we don't need a trade show. We've already got Quilt Market. We've got these trade shows around. But what we need is a new kind of trade association that would provide the business skills that I was just talking about, and as well as news coverage, because there really wasn't a quality online B2B news outlet for our industry, which all industries really deserve. And so we needed news coverage and education, and then a way to network outside of the 2 times a year that you would go to these trade shows. So for the rest of the year. And so that was the concept. And we spent 10 months building a WordPress membership site, and we'd met in person. Well, when we first got the business idea, we'd never met in person. Over the total time of our partnership, we saw each other in person twice. She's on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast. So it was completely virtual. And we launched in October of 2015. We had each put in $5,000 to help fund the creation of the website, which we made back in the first week that we launched. And it was successful right away. It was mostly quilters and sewing folks because, as I said, Kristen came from that background and so did I. So that we sent it to our email list and that's who joined. But subsequently has, in the past 10 years, has expanded to include everybody in the industry and all shapes and sizes, all kinds of businesses, well beyond quilting and sewing. But that was the origin of it, was to really create something different from what was out there already. And yeah, we were really excited to see the community's excitement about it.
So it sounds like the Craft Industry Alliance, which I love that the acronym is CIA, but that the CIA, that it really kind of removes the curtain and just kind of talks about things that for whatever reason, I feel like people are very hesitant to talk about. You mentioned a book contract. Why? Why are we the only people we're hurting by not discussing these things openly is ourselves as creators? It's the big companies that benefit from us not talking about it because then they can do whatever they want and we have no idea if that's normal or that we can negotiate and that kind of thing. So it sounds like the Craft Industry Alliance really helps the makers, the crafters to have more knowledge about how you can be lucrative, successful as a business owner. Is that correct?
Definitely. But it goes beyond that, right? So we have lots of big companies who are members now. Bernina, Michaels, Spoonflower, these big companies that everybody's heard from, all the big publishing companies, the book publishers, et cetera. So why are they members, right? If that would be the only goal. And the reason is, number one, we have a special news piece. It's called Craft Industry Insider that they get monthly. That's sort of a more global look, written by a business reporter. So they do get a special piece of news monthly. But also, it was really helpful for them to be in community with designers, teachers, quilt shop owners, yarn shop owners, craft studio owners, small batch manufacturers, because we all are essentially in the same business, right? We're creating things for people to creatively express themselves in their spare time, whether that's knitting a hat or, making a junk journal, whatever it might be. That's really what it's all about. And so we all have a lot more in common than not in common. And we've all seen big companies, over time evolve, for example, develop ambassador programs. Well, that wasn't something that let's just go to quilting fabric company had, certainly not in 2005 and not even in 2010. There were no ambassador companies and now there are. Well, why is that? That's because, we see the value of the influencer, the value of the designer, the teacher, et cetera. Same thing with the big sewing machine companies. They have these ambassador programs. But we've also seen, big companies trip up, decide, okay, we're not going to pay them. We don't need to pay ambassadors. And then come to realize, actually, we do need to pay them because they are actually professionals who bring something to the table that we need. And the only way that sort of information gets generated, passed around, absorbed is by being in community with each other and talking to each other and understanding each other's point of view and experiences. And so, for sure, we always talk with our smaller companies around, you're the talent and they need you just as much as you need them. So walking into, for example, if you're signing a licensing deal with a fabric company, you can see this as you produce artwork and that artwork goes on a lot of different surfaces and can be used in lots of different ways. You need fabric, and this is a company that makes fabric. So you're working in collaboration with them, and it's an equal collaboration. Now, they are putting up a lot of money to have your fabric printed, to have it shipped to the United States, to have it doubled and rolled and warehoused and distributed. So there's a big, financial risk that they're putting in on their part. But there's a lot that you're bringing to the table. And so you should also consider that instead of sort of being super flattered if they reach out, waiting for them to reach out in the first place, and signing whatever comes your way, So a contract really protects both parties. And if they're writing the contract and you have nobody reviewing it, the contract's protecting them and not you. So, it goes both ways. And eventually some of these very small businesses become big businesses. And we've seen that happen too. So you just don't know, not that there's pressure to do that always, but you don't know the path that these companies are going to end up taking. But we've all seen that happen. So we all benefit in being in communication and in community with one another.
I do really like that mindset. I had the, I guess, CEO, I hope I say the right term, of H&H Americas on the podcast recently, and he oozes this, like, he just thinks in everyone wins when we all work together. And it came out in like, well, and then we try to do this. And it just is such a beautiful, like, I really do like that, instead of pitting each other against, that we all really, like, a tide rises all boats, that we all really do benefit from working together, being in communication. And so I'm curious, in fact, I talked to a few friends that you're going to be on the podcast. They're like, oh my gosh, no way. Please ask. So I'm going to ask, what is included when someone joins the Craft Industry Alliance? It's what I want to say, like $150 a year. Currently, prices may change, but $150 a year. Why would someone want to join? And let's niche down to a quilterpreneur, a quilt pattern writer. What's in it for them?
Sure. And just to be clear, we do have a 6-month option that's $89. So if you just want to try it, that's a good affordable option. And then for an annual, for an individual, it's $119. So not even $150. So we do try to keep the prices affordable for very small businesses because that's where we started, and we totally understand what the finances look like when you're in those beginning stages, or even if you aren't in beginning stages, but you want to keep your business small, then, we totally understand what that looks like. So what you get access to, some of the things that we have are for everyone. News coverage is one of those. So our news articles are in front of our paywall. They are for everybody. And we do that for a lot of reasons. Number one, we need a news outlet, and we all benefit from being able to read about mergers and acquisitions and new hires and trends and what's going on in the industry. So news is in front of the paywall and is for everyone. And it's also the top of our funnel. So if you think about a sales funnel, right, how do people start out on the very top, the wide part of a funnel? And the way that happens is by people clicking over from Facebook group, from an Instagram post that they might see. Something's been shared somewhere. That's a news story that we wrote, and it's super relevant to them right at that moment. So, that could mean they are somebody who is interested in beads because they make jewelry, and, their show Bead and Button just got shut down. So that is going to be something people post in Facebook and in the beading Facebook groups. But if you Google it, there's really nothing about it because there's no news outlet that cares enough about that. So we write the article, we interview, the people who ran the show about why they decided to close it down. We interview the people who've been going for 30 years about what it meant to them and what the future might hold, et cetera. And we write a serious news article about it. And then that gets posted in that Facebook group. So then people click over, they subscribe to our newsletter because there's a little pop-up that says you can get a free newsletter. And that's the top of the funnel. So news is free and it's for everybody. So just so people are clear. But when you join, what you get is access to a whole lot of other stuff. So one of those things is live events. So we've been using Zoom since 2015. And when the pandemic hit, we were like, oh yeah, we're old hat at Zoom. We know all about it. We could teach everyone how to use Zoom because we've been using it for 5 years. So we host a webinar every month that's taught by an industry expert. So yesterday, we just had our webinar and it was taught by a CPA, and it was about getting ready for tax time because we're here at the beginning part of the year, and that's what is on people's mind, is preparing all the materials to get ready to file their taxes, hopefully on time and correctly. So, so that's the kind of thing that, we have as a live event. And we also have community events. So one of those is our craft business roundtable, which we host one during the day, one in the evening. The evening one is for people who work during the day and can never make those hours, or for people who live in Australia and New Zealand, for whom it's the next morning. And those are community gatherings. So we kind of all get on Zoom together as a big meeting, talk about what's happening in the industry, talk about what's happening in our businesses. It's fascinating. You have people who are president of a fabric company, people who run a massive quilt show, and people who, just wrote their first book, and people who just opened the brick and mortar store yesterday. So you have a whole lot of different people talking together. And again, I think that community is so valuable and it's so interesting. So that is a community event. We have other sort of smaller ones. So we have mastermind groups, where we, after you fill out kind of a survey about your business, place you in a small group of 4 to 7 people who are at a similar spot to where you are in your business and want to work on similar goals. So if it's growing your e-commerce shop, then they're all people who, like you, have had an e-commerce shop for 3 to 5 years and are looking to grow. And you meet together every other week for an hour virtually, set goals, share ideas and resources. We have an expert come and visit your group once to give you a consultation, all of that kind of stuff. So that's another sort of community live event that you only get access to if you're a member. We also have member discounts. So we have discounts that we've negotiated with all kinds of companies to give you discounts on pro tools that you'll need for your business, whether that's shipping, show insurance, professional development, so you can take online classes at a discount, tools, all kinds of things that you might need or want for your business. And a lot of our members take advantage of just a few of those discounts, and it pays for their membership. So that it takes care of the expense portion of it. So that stuff is all behind the paywall, and we also have a lot of resources. So, for example, you were talking about pulling back the curtain. One of the pieces there is sourcing. So if you're making kits, for example, you may in the beginning not really know, where do I go to buy X, Y, and Z wholesale? What is the minimum? Who do I call? How does it work? And so we do all that research for you. So if you, for example, are an indie yarn dyer or want to become one and want to know where to buy blanks of superwash, we have all of the resources there done for you. So you can look at that list, figure it out, make some phone calls, and you're on your way. And that's the kind of thing that is kept secret. And, we never, by the way, pressure or ask our members to reveal any trade secrets of any sort, just so to set people's mind at ease. That is not at all what this is about. If you want to share that stuff, great. If you don't want to, there is no pressure or no need to do that. But, so same thing with jewelry and beading. Where do you go to buy findings wholesale, and how much does it cost, and what are the sources? So we figure all of that information out and have a huge library of resources so that when you come on, if you need a sales rep, who are the sales reps? Here's all their addresses, phone numbers, the territories they cover. So, that stuff's all created in response to our members' requests. We don't know, what are the best sort of sources of swag I'm going to need to create for the trade show? What are really creative swag that people actually keep and don't throw away? We have all of those lists. So lots and lots of things like that are resources that you only get access to if you're a member. So that's kind of what is behind the paywall and what might be worth paying for folks. But the podcasts and news coverage that's in front and is really just for the community.
Pretty cool. I'm curious. I've never done a trade show. I signed up one year to have a booth at QuiltCon, and then my husband changed careers, and I was like, I can't. I gotta be home for this. But my biggest thing that I was like, what am I going to do was how to set up a booth and what materials to use. And like, I've seen this booth that looks really good. Is that something inside Craft Industry Alliance that it's like, here's where to get materials and blah, blah, blah?
Yeah, exactly. Like how to set up a trade show booth and get started with that. And that's actually a great idea. I'm not sure we have that exact resource. So now I'm thinking maybe we should make one. So,
I've got
the
so
other
many
piece of
ideas
this,
for you. Not that you need more.
yeah, it's like it's always evolving and developing. And so we have resources that we update every year because it's like shipping cutoffs for the holidays, that sort of thing. And then we have new ones that we're constantly creating or old ones that, who remembers Periscope and some of these older like social media apps that came and went that we remove. So it's a constant sort of ongoing organic process to keep all of the things that we have up to date, because we all know software companies come and go and all that stuff. So you might have recommended this one and now it's gone or whatever, or the prices are crazy high now or whatever. So, that there's a lot of upkeep when it comes to having a library like that, where things get out of date, links get broken, and you have to constantly be monitoring and fixing them. But we're devoted to all of the resources that are in that library to make sure that they're up to date. And then the other piece of it too is we have a Facebook group that's just for members. And our intention at some point is to move off of Facebook. We did have forums event at the start, but we found that it's really difficult to beat Facebook when it comes to bringing people back again and again and giving them notifications right where they already are, et cetera. So right now we are on Facebook as a Facebook group that is members only. So we, vet you when you apply to be part of it. And if your membership expires, then we delete you out of the group. So the group is just for members. And that's also a great resource in place to ask questions. So for example, if you were going to be going to QuiltCon and vending for the first time, you could ask, where do I get whatever it is that you're looking for your booth. And, we've got tons of members who have vended not just at QuiltCon, but at shows for decades and can give you information, how to ship everything there, how to, all the things that you might need for a show like that. So that's another way to ask and get those answers. And then sometimes from those answers, we will then create a resource and obviously supplement from what this sort of crowdsource creates. But because the problem right with Facebook is that those posts get buried and then they're gone. And so the website endures and is searchable and organized so that you can find those things back again in 3 years when you're like, I wasn't ready then, but I'm ready now. And where was that? So.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a team now? I mean, logistically, I'm thinking of even just deleting people from the Facebook group. What the, like how do you keep on top of all of this? And your SEO is amazing. When I Google stuff, Craft Industry Alliance comes up first, which I'm so intrigued how you get all this information.
Yeah, the SEO is really important. Again, going back to that top of the funnel situation. So yes, we do have a team, thank gosh. And I have such great people who work with me. So we're all remote. I'm in Boston. And then I have a director of operations, Kate, who lives in Colorado. And then I have a sales manager who also works on member engagement, Stephanie, who spends part of her time in Ireland and part of it in Pittsburgh. Right now, she's in Ireland. And then our most recent hire is Sarah, who lives in North Carolina, and she manages our community. So you're right. Like, again, so many problems with Facebook, but another one of the problems with Facebook is that you have to manually update who's in and who's out of the group. Whereas, obviously, if you have forums on your website, if you can't log in if you're not a member, so you don't have to do any of that. But every single day, Sarah has to welcome members in and delete members out. So, that requires. I mean, she does a lot more than that, but that is one of the duties of a community manager. When you have a Facebook group. So those are our 3 incredible employees. And then we also have a consultant. She's a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging community consultant, Ashley, who's with us 4 hours a month. And she helps with all things DE&I and is an amazing, amazing resource. She's been with us for 5 years. And we have Amberly, who manages our Instagram account, because God knows Instagram is a whole other beast. And so it only gets updated and managed because of Amberly. So we have lots of other, folks like that, who do, work for us as contractors. But it's the core team is myself and these 3 employees. And then we are also the strategic partner with H&H Americas, which you had mentioned
Oh,
earlier.
cool.
So we plan for that show, and we've worked with them from the very beginning, from long before, about a year prior to the beginning. We are the strategic partner, which means that we plan all the education at the show. So we book all the keynote speakers. I moderate and host the State of the Industry panel that opens the show. And then we book all the main stage panel discussions. We book all the business classes, and then we also book everything, all the teachers and the whole day for H&H University, which is an all-inclusive, all-day conference that happens the day before the show opens. So that's a huge aspect of what we do now and brings our community together in person at this single unified show that's to the trade. So I said earlier, there were existing trade associations when we launched, but they were essentially trade shows, and we didn't have a trade show. And that was great because a trade show is a really big job and requires a lot of skills and a lot of capital output that we don't have. But when H&H wanted to expand into the U.S. market, because they're a German company and they've had H&H Cologne in Cologne, Germany for a long, long time, in addition to like 80 other trade shows in all sorts of other industries. When they wanted to expand into the U.S. market, as you said, Darren is very collaborative and reached out to us and said, you're the trade association, we would like to partner. And that was perfect because it gave us a trade show without the financial risk, without all of the logistics. And they know what they're doing. They've been in business for over 100 years. And so they do all of what they're really good at, and we get to do all of what we're good at, which is bringing people together. We market the show to our members. We market the show to our members to be exhibitors and to be attendees. And then we plan all the education, which is exactly what we are best at. So that's been a fantastic partnership. It is a ton of work, however. I'm not going to
I can't even imagine. I cannot imagine.
Yeah. So that takes up a lot of my time at the moment, just because we are in the start of the year and the show's in May. And we just launched a new fall trade show that will be in Houston in early October of 2026, when we're the partner for that show as well. So we need to get started planning. And we have a committee, a conference committee who helps us.
Okay,
But yes, they're fantastic. But I have to form that committee and, organize it, et cetera.
No, I'm overwhelmed just thinking about what you do. By the way, I'm very excited about Houston. I'm in Houston. And so when Quilt Market ended, I was like, bummer. And then I reached out to H&H. I don't know who does their Instagram, but I was like, is it going to be every year in Houston? They're like, not committing to that yet. I'm like, or not committing to it. I don't know if ever, but I'm going to. Anyhow, I'm glad they're doing it this fall.
Yeah, we're certainly starting in Houston because there was such a really long and rich tradition of the companies in quilting gathering together in October in Houston. And we definitely wanted to honor that by bringing this show there. So I'm excited about it too. I think it will be distinctively different from the May show. It's called H&H
cool.
Fall Edition. And I think certainly in year one, it's going to be a lot of quilting. I think it will expand and change over time, just as H&H has. So I'm excited about it. I think it's a great opportunity.
I'm excited. I'm going to H&H this spring for the first time. And
you're going to love it.
I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how you get your information. So I have something to share and then an ask. So when I Google information about like how much does the average person spend on quilting a year or whatever, it's always Craft Industry Alliance that comes up. How do you get this information? That's what I want to know.
Well, it's a good question. I mean, part of it, as I said earlier, is like nobody else is covering this this industry. I mean, the Wall Street Journal will write an article about craft if it's about Etsy, because Etsy is this massive public company, so there's times when, the New York Times will cover craft, but it's not frequently, and our companies are too small, and they just don't have the interest, frankly, or the audience for it. So part of the reason is that's all we do. So if you have that kind of niche interest and question and you Google it, we're the only people who've written about it. So you're going to get to us first. So that's part of it. Also, we have good SEO because our site is structured well, and we have a great developer, and that's part of it too, to making sure that it's done correctly and that we keep on top of changes in SEO over time. And as far as where do we get the information? So my mom's a journalist, and growing up, she wrote for the Washington Post and the LA Times, and then for our local newspaper as well. And so I grew up with that as part of my life. And I realized, although I had been trained as a teacher, that I actually really enjoy writing and journalism as well. So I do a lot of reporting, and as a result, for our website, and did for my personal blog before we started Craft Industry Alliance. And so over time, a lot of the ways that the information comes is through developing sources. And that just means relationships. So if you know the, folks at Missouri Star, then when things happen and Missouri Star acquires Webs, you have someone to call. And they know who you are. They were expecting your call. They'll take your call and they'll share with you what they're going to share. And that's incredibly helpful. And so it's really a matter of building trust. And that trust is built by being first, and it's also built by being accurate. So you have to be on top of it. And I know it sounds silly, but craft news does break, and it breaks at all kinds of hours. Sometimes it's, Sunday night at 9 where you're like, uh-oh, look what just happened. And then everything has to get dropped, and you have to make phone calls and write the piece so that it goes up Monday morning. It's first and it's correct. Because then before the press release goes out by the company, before somebody shares it in a Facebook group, that's where it is. And people know I come there first and it's there. And that is an ongoing challenge. We do have a pool of over 200 freelancers who write articles for the website. So it is just not just me, for sure. And they're amazing and bring us stories all the time as well. But a lot of it too is, as I said, I came from quilting and sewing. And developing sources in yarn was the second task after launch, because I didn't know anything about yarn. I can crochet, but not well. And I did, what are these words? DK weight. I didn't know what any of this was. What is superwash? I didn't know what any of these words were. Who is Madeline Tosh? Like all the companies, I had to learn all of that. And then develop those relationships so that there are sources. So, part of the way to do that actually is by having a podcast, which I'm sure you've learned yourself. Because once you've talked to somebody for an hour on your podcast and helped to promote their business, they become somebody who you're in a relationship with, and could then call or email and be like, hey, I saw what is going on? What is this? And they will, take your call because they know who you are. So yeah, it's a lot of talking to people. It's a lot of curiosity. It's just following your own curiosity, seeing something. I'm in over 100 Facebook groups of makers. So I'm in there listening all the time to what people are saying. What are questions that are people are asking? I'm on Reddit all the time, on the Craft Snark Reddit thread, subreddit. People you have to be out there watching and listening. But so yarn and fabric, I feel like I got it. Getting into jewelry and beading, I am in a bunch of jewelry and beading groups. Same thing with scrapbooking, mixed media. Like it's harder to get sourced there because I don't have those relationships yet. Um, so, there's always more people to know. But it primarily just comes through sources. That's really where you get the information. And then
Huh.
through constantly being on top of it, like being able to say, we're going to drop everything and write the story right now so that we're first and it's right.
Very, very interesting and very cool. It's all about people, relationships,
Yeah.
So my ask years ago now, maybe 3 years ago, I did a survey, but my audience is not as big as Craft Industry Alliance. I would love to know. I'm curious about how much does a quilt pattern writer earn from their quilt pattern sales? And I would love to know that information, especially since I teach a course, how to write and sell quilt patterns. And people are like, well, how much can you expect to earn? I would love to have tangible, lots and lots of data to share. And it's really hard to get that and even the survey, I'm not a professional survey person because even once I put it out, people were like, oh, I wish I knew this and that. I'm like, oh, that'd be good to add too. Have you ever done something like that? Would you ever be consider doing something like that?
Yeah. Survey data is really, really hard to get. You're 100% right. So especially, and you're talking about business to business survey data. So you're looking to find out what these businesses are earning. But even harder to get in some ways is consumer data, because to do a quality consumer study, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars to be able to have somebody. First of all, crafting survey questions is a science, and so that they're not biased. And I don't know anything about how to do that, but there are expert agencies that do that, and that's all they do. And then sending it to a wide enough audience so that you're getting 25,000 responses from a diverse set of consumers. And so there's very few companies that will, number one, pay for that, have the capital to pay for it. And number two, will share it. So there are companies that pay for it, but they don't share it. And you may be able to see it if that company goes public. So it'll be, in their S1. But other than that, you're not going to see that information. Handy Quilter is a company for a long time, due to Mark Harlan, who's just retired's leadership, who has paid for that kind of consumer research and has shared it. And so we summarize and share those graphs on our website. And then they get quoted all over the place and
Yep.
attributed to us, which we didn't create it, but that's okay. Now, Local Crafts Group, which owns Barocco, which is a yarn company, they do a smaller scale, although the yarn industry is in itself smaller. So perhaps appropriately smaller scale consumer research study and present that data. And on the Friday of H&H, so the last day of the show, the keynote in the morning is the presentation of those two industry research pieces. And
Very
then we
excited for
summarize that data on our website as well. So that consumer data is super hard. But if you are writing a business plan because you need to open a brick and mortar shop and need to lease space, you need to submit that business plan in order to get the lease. So you need to be able to prove that there's a market for what it is you're selling. And the only way to prove that is through quality consumer data. So we take all the consumer studies that are available out there and we keep them in one resource and link to all of them. So there are other smaller consumer studies, and anytime one comes out, we find it, we download it, we save it. And so we have a spot on our website that is specifically for research. And we've had many people write business plans and been like, oh my God, thank God you have this, because I had no data. Now, as far as business to business data, yeah, it doesn't exist, right? Like, again, our industry, and it may seem like there's money that's floating around. It's actually such small. It's really a small amount of money that floats around in this industry overall. If you compare it to something like fashion or food, like the size of those companies is enormous. So when you're a food blogger, which might be the equivalent of being a quilting pattern designer. You're writing DIY content for people that you're going to make money off of and that they're going to benefit from. Or you're like a fashion influencer, the kind of deals you can get,
Yeah.
the kind of ad revenue you can make, it's way, way out of proportion to what
It's a
you're
different ball
looking
game.
at. It's a very different ball game.
Which sometimes I get envious of that. I'm like, man.
100%. So if you're like Del Monte, the type of survey you can come up with and send, right.
Yeah.
So you get the point. It's very difficult to do and to do well, and it's expensive. So, I've talked to many different sort of industry stakeholders over the years about doing a survey. It's certainly something that's on our mind. Sort of future goals, I guess.
I'll share it with my audience. So
yeah, I've had big companies say, okay, we'll contribute, we'll be part of it. So we'll see, I would say. But, I think doing those small audience surveys that you've done, or smaller audience surveys that you've done, is valuable, and to keep doing it. And I think that the answer to the question of how much can you, actually make is it depends. It depends.
Totally does.
I mean, there are people who have, one pattern, 50 patterns, 100 patterns, and make, $8,000 a year because that's the scale that their business is at for whatever reason. And there are people who have one viral pattern and make $100,000 a year off of that single pattern. So, it depends. I think that if you really want to, and we all know this, right, make a living as a quilt pattern designer, the answer to your question is you're going to need to have multiple income streams. And one of those is to design patterns and put them on the internet as PDF downloads. And there are many, many other options to add into that, depending on your skill set, your talent, your interests, your availability, who you are as a person, what you like to do. We're not all YouTubers. I'm certainly not. But some of us are teachers and others hate that, never want to teach. And there's no requirement that you do any one of those things. But there's lots of ways to make it work. And, I just had Maria Schell on the podcast, for example, and she teaches and she sells quilts, but she doesn't design patterns. But she doesn't design patterns. So that's a whole different way, and she's very well known. This is her full-time job. She's doing very well, but doesn't create patterns at all because she just doesn't fit with her philosophy of what she's trying to achieve. So I think it really depends. There's lots of ways to do it, which is great and means that there's room for absolutely everybody who wants to get in and do it. And can you do it as your side hustle after a full-time day job or taking care of children? Absolutely. And that's also an incredible thing about it.
Okay, then I have a question for you, and I'm actually putting you on the spot here.
Sure.
And if you're like, I don't know that information,
sure,
totally
no
fine. Or if you're like, actually, come in Craft Industry Alliance and that information's there, tell me that. So, okay, I generally look for guest blog post writers, and I will pay them to do a guest blog post. And it's a win-win. I tell them, hey, use this to grow your email list, have like a freebie, an opt-in. I'll share it with my email list. I'm just curious, what, and it's probably so different, but anyhow, do you have any insight into what the going rate is to pay someone to be a guest blog post writer? Because I did reach out to someone else and they were like, oh, I would charge $500 to do that. And I was like, gulp, like, I don't know if I can stomach that, but is that the going rate? So do you have any insight into that?
That's a good question. And, freelance rates for writers have plummeted. And now with AI, I mean, it's really tough. There were people for a long, long stretch who could freelance, not for quilting or sewing or craft, but for, magazines, like think of Harper's, as a magazine, and write a long form article and do that for Harper's, for GQ, for whatever, these big magazines, and could write like 4 or 5 of those in a year and earn a living. That's how it was
Wow.
for a long time. Yeah. And that world is all gone.
Yeah.
It really is gone. And it's very, very, I'm in a Facebook group called the Binders for Freelance Writers. It's all women freelance writers. And I mean, it's a tough, tough market out there. People, they used to pay by the word. Now, I mean, there's these content mills that pay you essentially nothing. So,
Mm-hmm.
part of our ethos at Craft Industry Alliance from the start, and I love that you're paying your contributors, is that we're paying all of our contributors because, especially back in 2015, I mean, there were companies that would pay you for content in glue.
Yeah.
They'd
Yeah.
pay you in glitter, literally. We'll send you glitter. That was the payment. And we were like, we're never going to be that. If you contribute, if you write for us, if you teach a webinar for us, whatever it is you're doing, if you host a meeting for us, we pay you. Everybody gets paid in money
Mm-hmm.
from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important to pay people for sure. As far as what is the rate, yeah, we are also a small business and it is hard to find those funds. And we spend a lot of money on content, as you can imagine. Like in a monthly expenditure, it's a big percentage is paying writers.
Mm-hmm.
And paying teachers to teach to teach for us, but it's worth it. So could you pay them somewhere between $200 and $400? Probably. It's a stretch. Like it's tough to do.
Right.
Could you pay them $150 if it's a shorter piece? Probably. Some people will not want to do that, and that's totally fine. So if somebody comes back and says, for me, that would need to be 500 and it's out of your budget, just be like, I totally respect that. It is out of my budget at this time,
Mm-hmm.
but I hope to get there and I will reach back out, and in the meantime, like, so glad to know you and all good, so I have that happen all the time. Like we can't afford somebody's rate, but they're an amazing person. And sometimes we'll find the funds to do it, So we just had, for example, in December, we really like to do trends because it's trends for the coming year. And so we have a trends forecaster do a webinar for us and then create a PDF of like a visual PDF of trends for the new year. And it's one of our most popular webinars, probably the most popular webinar of the year. We use it as a lead magnet. It's incredibly popular. As most people love to look at trends, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like eye candy. It's super easy to digest, so like everybody
Mm-hmm.
wants it. But it's expensive. If you've ever tried to get trends, it's hard to get. Somebody and this woman, Renee, she was a trends forecaster for Doris, if everyone remembers Doris, but it used to be like a wholesale company that was incredible and got swallowed up by Michaels and disappeared. But she did actual trend forecasting for this huge company for years, and she really knows how to do it. But it's expensive. So the way that we made that work is we opened up tickets to that event to people who weren't members and said, if you would like to attend and you aren't a member, you can attend for this one-time a la carte payment. We got enough people to pay for it, to pay to just attend that session. And then they got the recording for a certain number of weeks afterward that it paid for the trend forecaster. So there's times when you're like, okay, I can't afford your rate, but I really want this piece. How can we figure it out? Could I get a
Mm-hmm.
sponsor? Could I reach out and say, I'm going to work with this big company and they're going to pay the content provider and we're going to both use it on our audience? I've done that with, for years, we did a surface design symposium with Spoonflower. And it was an all-day virtual event with panels and workshops. And Bonnie Christine was the keynote one year. And, you can imagine what the rates are for some of this. And you're having 5 panelists, you have to pay everybody. So, but we partnered with Spoonflower and that made it so that we could afford to do it. And our audience is valuable to them. We all share all the registrants. We all share all the recordings. It benefits everybody. So, there's sometimes ways to make it work if you can't afford it. And then there's sometimes where you're like, I'm so sorry, but I just can't. But I respect people who want to charge what they're worth. And as long as they're like professional
Actually
about it.
worth it. Yeah.
And worth it. Because we do have, I have people who come to say, I'd like to write for you, and then either flake out and don't turn it in. And I was depending on that piece for next week's newsletter, or they send it to you and you can't use it. And in that situation, we have to pay them a kill fee, and then I have to reassign or write it myself.
A kill fee. I've never heard about that. That sounds like not
part
fun.
of our contract. Yeah. If we sign that you're going to do the research and write this article, and you do the best you can do or whatever you can do, and you turn it in and it's not up to the standard. And even if we go back and forth, and I can see it's never going to be there, we pay you a percentage of the final amount that we were committed to paying you. And
Ouch.
you could take that piece and shop it elsewhere.
Yeah,
so then you're
true.
free to say, I'll go to some other publication and see if they want it. And at least you didn't, you cut your losses. So that's part of our contract. But it is painful because now I'm paying somebody for a deadline that they didn't meet, and now I have no article. So, there's a lot of stress.
Even if they don't meet the deadline, you still have to pay that fee to them?
No.
Okay.
No. They I guess they met the deadline, but the deliverable was not.
Gotcha.
And not to say this happens often. Honestly, it might happen once a year. But it's a painful moment for sure. So, but it's all part of running a media company.
Yeah. Looking ahead 5 to 10 years, where do you see the craft industry heading, especially with AI and just the future of the craft industry?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I do think with AI, there's a lot of implications. One of them is that people more and more crave making things with their hands. They also really crave being with other human beings, especially post-pandemic. That's still with us. So that spells great things for teachers. It spells great things for shop owners, people who want to go to knit night, sit with other people who knit, talk about knitting, get help with their knitting, buy yarn in person, etc. Like the more, if you think about it, we used to own records and tapes. I'm 50, so I used to own those things. And then CDs. And now we rent music. All of our music's on Spotify, and we rent it, but we don't own it. And so much of life has become that way. So it's just all in our phone, and we don't own any of it. And people really want something that's tangible. And I think that human desire, which we've had since this very start of humanity, endures and only gets strengthened with the influx of AI. So I think that's one piece. I also think it's going to be so easy to create content online that's inauthentic. That's a video of a fake person who looks real. It's only going to get more and more convincing and more disappointing and alienating as time goes by. And so, again, that spells really good things for those of us who are human beings and have that talent and skill and willingness to share, because it just means that, being real, a real person, becomes more and more valuable because it's more and more rare as we're going to be sort of dumped all of this slop that's going to increasingly be around us. So I think that's a hopeful note for teachers, for designers, for those of us who are real people who have a unique point of view to share. So that's good for the future of craft, but it's changing, and one thing about it is it's always changing. And I think it's best to have a sense of wide-eyed curiosity instead of a feeling of resentment about the constant and changing nature of the market. Because if you do have that feeling of resentment, you start to get burnt out. You start resenting your customers. You start to feel hostile about the whole situation. And then your joy is gone. So if you can look at it and be like, what can I do with this? How does it work? Let me get in and try it. Oh, I don't like it. I'm not going to use it. Or I do like it. Or I could use it in this other way that nobody's thinking of. Or, just to get in there and be curious. See for yourself. Be a critical thinker. And I think that attitude is the right way forward.
I love that, just being adaptable. That's how we progress and move forward, And I've heard people in like Facebook groups, just this fear of, oh no, what will we do as quilt pattern writers if AI can write a quilt pattern that's quick? We're not there yet, but I'm sure it will happen, and it's okay. We'll adapt. We are very creative human beings. We can figure out what else to offer. It'll probably be something we haven't even thought of right now because new things will present themselves. But what will not go away is the human connection, wanting to create with our hands and have a real experience. And so that I do. Right. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So where can listeners find you and the Craft Industry Alliance?
Yeah. So on social media, we're at Craft Industry Alliance, and our website is craftindustyalliance.org. And what I would do is sign up for our newsletter. It goes out on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Eastern. So you'll get it. It is a roundup of craft industry news of the week. So lots of links to interesting things you might have missed. If you don't like it, you can always unsubscribe. It's totally free. But if you're curious and are like, oh, I'll try it, that's where I would go. It's right on our homepage, and sign up and see what you think.
Awesome. Also so impressed. How far out do you have that newsletter planned? Because to have it comes every Wednesday at this time. Kudos. Like that's a lot.
I write it on Tuesday.
Okay. So if you get sick, what happens? Like
I was going to tell you a funny story about that because the first time I got COVID, which was, like 2022 or something like that. I got COVID for the first time, and I was like out, I was like really sick in bed, and I got it on a Wednesday. And my whole family was like, good thing you got COVID on a Wednesday. And I was like, oh my God, what is my life? Like, because I've been writing this newsletter in some form every Wednesday for like 12 years, longer. Anyway, a very long time. And I've never missed one. So my family is like, oh, don't call her. It's Tuesday. Like she's working. So yeah, that's where we are. Like, good thing you didn't get COVID on a Tuesday.
Impressive. Well, thank you so much. I am definitely going to go join the newsletter subscription list. I'm intrigued and very excited. I hope I get to see you at H&H. Thank you so much.
Of course. This was wonderful. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this podcast episode with Abby Glassenberg about the Craft Industry Alliance, go ahead and leave a review for the podcast. Just share what you enjoyed about this episode, or you can just tap 1 through 5-star review. That's on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. Thank you so much, Abby, for being a guest on the podcast. I thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you. So eye-opening. I'm excited to go and dive into the Craft Industry Alliance myself. And listeners, I hope that you enjoyed it too. Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you next week with a brand new episode.